Welcome to Yelling into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin Crody, resident DPS enthusiast, lost in class reworks as of right now. Joining me in this endeavor is Scott Daly, who cast aside any care for healers' mana and sanity when he swapped over to tanking. How are you doing today, Scott?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you? It's a great day. It's July 3rd. There are fireworks going off in the background, and I'm ready to talk about World of Warcraft. So how can things get any better?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm looking forward to diving into a lot of the changes and everything that's been happening around WoW lately. There's way more than just a little bit to cover,
It's a
so hopefully we can
crazy
do it.
time. Yeah, it's a crazy time in this game, and that's why we're starting this thing, right? This is our first episode numero uno. Um, there's a lot of World of Warcraft content out there, but I thought we thought we could do something a little bit different, a little special. So we're doing it. We're doing it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to talking about it. So, just to kind of give a general overview, the main goal for this podcast is going to be discussing WoW in general. It's not going to be focusing on specifically just retail or classic or whatever other versions of the game they decide to come out with, because let's face it, they've came out with like 500 different versions of the game right now. So, um, for a lot of the core game stuff, we'll probably be talking about some end game activities and Mythic Plus raid, class discussion, just general news. But to give you kind of a background on where we all started from with World of Warcraft, and give the audience just a little bit of an insight into what our current, um, I don't know, resume is for all of this.
Hell yeah.
Scott, you want to start off with your background with WoW and
Yeah.
RPGs?
Yeah, well, I'm old. So I started with this game back when it came out. I actually played EverQuest before it and jumped onto the WoW train when it came out. I didn't like get really into the game at first though. I think I didn't get max level till TBC and really didn't do anything raiding outside of like Karazhan until Lich King. Really it was Cataclysm that was like my big did a lot of raiding in, and then my guild fell apart and I escaped. I was one of those rare people that escaped the game,
You
but
never
not
escape.
not forever. I came back ironically in the worst possible part to come back to WoW, which is Shadowlands Sanctum of Domination patch.
Mass exodus to
Yeah,
Final Fantasy patch.
everyone was leaving, and I said, "Great time to come." Basically, like I don't even remember what happened. Is I was just like bored one day perusing Twitch and happened to see that the Race to World First was on, and I just started watching it, and I was having fun watching it because it's a fun event to watch. And I didn't know any of the background of like what was going on in the game right now and why everyone was really really pissed off at the game. I just didn't know any of it. I was like, "Hey, this looks like fun." And then from there, I learned about Mythic Plus and I was like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. Actually, I want to try that." And so like I dipped my toe into the WoW waters once again, and fast forward to 3 years later, and here we are. So that's how it worked for me. But yeah, no, I really like to play this game. As you said, I came back to play healer. I used to play a tank, but yeah, just like coming back to the game after that much time and playing tank scared me because I felt like, especially in the Mythic Plus environment, like not knowing the dungeons or not knowing really how to play, I feel like
Yeah.
that would be not good. And as a healer, I could kind of hide. I don't need to know the mechanics. It's just bar go up, make bar go up. Can handle that, which turned out to be only kind of true. But so that's what I came back as. And yeah, I really, really love Mythic Plus. I've enjoyed raiding as well. I've only done like heroic stuff. I haven't dipped into mythic raiding at all. But no, I think the game is in a great place right now, and I'm really, really loving it. It's good to be back addicted to an MMORPG.
For sure. Yeah. The main thing for a lot of all of this is just like kind of getting an understanding of where we currently are right now, right?
Yeah.
So I think you really hit the nail on the head. Like I think the game's in a good spot. It's got a bunch of different things that are flourishing. So
Yeah, what's your background with this drug we ingest?
yeah, so I started playing the game when I was young.
No, don't do this
So
to
I
me. Please
started
don't do this to me.
I'm sorry. I started when BC probably just first came out. I can't for the life of me remember exactly when. Um, but I played Burning Crusade, I played Wrath of the Lich King, and then I finally got a max level character in Cataclysm. So in Cata is when I really started diving in, like you, to raiding. Um, I don't know why. It seems like that's always a trend for people. Maybe it's because Firelands was such a damn good raid. I don't know,
Yes, sir.
but I've played fairly consistently since Cataclysm. I quit for a little bit in Mists of Pandaria, um, but I've been playing every expansion since Warlords of Draenor. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think you and I already know this, but shared love for Mythic Plus. It's like the best thing that's ever happened in the game, in my opinion. So
100%. Yeah.
that's 100% what I try to focus on nowadays. Um, I've mythic rated in the past, what I would call heroic plus for the majority of it. So like the 2 to 3 bosses deep into mythic. I was in a guild one time where we made it further, but um, as of recently, it's just been trying to focus on AOTC, and you know now I'm trying to push back into mythic. It is a ton of fun. It's just the the contingency of having to have a specific number of people is not only terrible for mythic rating, but also classic versions of the game where you don't have flex rating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's kind of, I think, where I want this podcast and the content we make to kind of fit, because there's, as we joked around in the intro, there's a lot of content around this game. There's a lot of people that play this game. There's a lot of people that make content for this game, but I feel like most of the stuff I see is by people that play this game as their job, which
yeah,
no shame, like like that's fine, right? That's great. I'm jealous of those people. I wish someone would pay me money to play this game. um but they will have a very certain specific outlook on what it's like to play this game, when every time they play they have basically a line of 2,000 people that would be willing to group up with them, and they have teams of other content creators, and this whole community within the community that exists for people that create content for this game. That's
yeah,
not us, right? That's not you and me. We have full-time jobs. I have children. We get to play as much as we possibly can, but that ends up being not too often at the end of the day. But I think we're in this weird spot where we're not casual either, right? Like,
for
we
sure. No,
try to push as far into this game as we possibly can. Like, we um are, like, I would say top 1% Mythic Plus people. Just, I mean, and that's not like, I'm not like gloating. That's just like statistically, when you look at the score we get at the end of the season, it ends up being at about the 1% mark. So, I
right.
mean, that's it's pretty high. So that's not casual content, but I also feel like the people that talk about this game the most often are not us. Um for obvious reasons, because the people that talk about this game most often are the people that get paid to talk about this game, so that's why. And I think it's good and interesting to have a point of view that I think a vast majority of the people that engage with the systems of the game are on. Like, again, not the super casual people that don't step foot into dungeons and just do world content, which, by the way, nothing but respect for those people, but I don't understand how they can play this game. I don't get that. I don't get it. um
I'm with you, and I 100% agree that like that's kind of our focus. We want to make sure that we have an understanding on not only the top end and higher level stuff. When you're pushing into key levels, I guess using the new key levels, your 15s or whatever like that.
yeah.
But also having an idea of lower keys, so anywhere between the 0 and 12 mark with
Hmm.
this new system, and also pugging. I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that's like super understated when it comes to the WoW content creator community is nobody really explains kind of like the struggles of why certain things are just so much more atrocious when it comes to being in an uncoordinated group.
Yeah.
um, it's night and day.
Well, and the problems that arise in these systems when you are with a set group of 5 people versus when you are pugging, like, that is, I think we played in a set group of 5 people for like the first time in my experience in this game last season, and like
Yeah.
I saw a lot of problems arise from the Mythic Plus system in that scenario that I never had to worry about when I was pugging. Because like key depletion doesn't matter as much when you're pugging. Because the key was depleted, I'll just find another one. Not getting the key that you need or want is not as big of a deal when you're pugging because you just find someone else's key. But when you're a group of
Yeah.
5 people, suddenly this idea of homework keys rears its ugly head. And for a
Yeah.
person that's playing this game 10 hours a day because it's their job, that's not a problem, right? Homework keys, we don't love them, but we'll do them. But for you and me, spending our entire night one night of 3 nights a week we have to play doing keys just to hopefully re-roll and get the thing that we actually need, that's not great. And that's
Yeah.
that's a thing that, like, that's a part of the system that I wasn't even aware, a problem with that system I wasn't even aware of until we got into that specific thing. So yeah, the I mean, I think that is one of the things that is so difficult about this system is that there are like 40 different problems and they're only problems for certain people based on how
Yeah.
they engage with the system. And so how do you fix every single one of those problems? Can you? And they're trying. They are trying, which is
They
which is
are
fun.
trying, and it just so happens, believe it or not, that's what we wanna talk about today. So,
Hey.
kind of going into that, so for those who haven't been made aware, there are changes to the Mythic Plus system, in the War Within. So currently what they're doing is they have this, like, bucket of affixes that are all going to be applied up until you hit Keystone level 12. And at Keystone level 12, essentially all affixes go away. For the best way to put it is all affixes go away.
Yeah.
Fortified Tyrannical stick around, but since they're both on there, you might as well just act like neither are on there. Anyways, all affixes go away, and it's just you versus the dungeon, and that's it. Um, so I think that they're trying to address this in kind of a multi-pronged way, and I think that that's really good. The only thing that is a bit weird is they're trying to shake things up for those people who just do their like weekly keys, so that they don't do the same thing every week,
Yeah.
and that makes sense. The problem is one of the current affixes that they have in there requires a lot of coordination, and they're trying to make this catered towards more uncoordinated groups. So yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a miss, but also we're going in the right direction, so it's hard to be upset about it. I don't know. What are your takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited in general. I'm excited about just the general design philosophy that says we are almost going to split Mythic Plus into 2 groups.
Yeah,
One is the people just pushing to get to the end of the reward structure, and then be done and happy with it. And two, the people that want to push as high as they can go just to see that score go up. They will essentially be playing a different version of the game from each other. Not exactly, but kind of.
yeah,
I think that's smart in the end. I do agree with you that we've got this rotating seasonal or maybe expansional. I don't know actually what this +2 affix is going to be.
yeah,
We've only seen 2 of the rotating um, affixes so far. I don't even know if they've said how many they're going to be. I guess maybe 4 is the safe assumption there. I have no idea.
yeah,
We've only seen 2 of them. One of them is a frenzy thing that happens on the ads when they get to 30% health. I think
yeah.
they attack faster, but they also take more damage. So that's how they're doing the kiss curse bit there. And then yeah, that second one that we played with on beta this week. Um, it was just the way it was described in the patch notes. I actually got pretty excited about it because it basically made it seem like these orbs were going to spawn. The orbs were going to attempt to come in contact with the mobs, and if you prevented that, if you stopped that, you would get the buff. So it's a giant haste buff, but if you get it, if you prevent it. And so I imagine like orbs falling from the sky and then tethering to a mob and moving slowly to it, and then you just step over the orb, you get the buff instead. That's what I had in
Mm,
my head. Then we
yep.
log into the game, and it's just the Razageth sparks again, which are just sparks that require any form of CC to interrupt them.
But
Which,
like 15 of them.
yeah, yeah, well, 20, I think actually. I think
Yeah,
there's
it's
20
so
total.
many.
Yeah,
There's so many.
which like in and of itself is not that bad. Like that's a much easier affix to deal with than like a bunch of the old ones, like explosive and quaking and all this stupid like it's infinitely better than all that other stuff. But like it also kind of goes directly against what their design philosophy with affixes was, which was like specifically nameplate clutter. Which now we have
Yeah.
20 things in the middle of boss fight spawning and crowding your screen. And also Tevin, I have this thing with them. These dungeons require so much crowd control that
Yep.
all the mobs do so much, whether it's casts or like things that need to be stunned or interrupted or knocked back, like so much. And then now also you're going to have this thing that happens every so often that you have to burn crowd control on. I mean,
Yeah.
this was afflicted for me as a healer all these past seasons since it came out, the past 3 seasons. It was, if I get in a boss fight that requires a dispel and also I have afflicted, I hate myself because I have to choose or maybe just spam heal on the afflicted, which no one enjoys doing. It was just a shitty thing where I feel like I need to be aware of my cooldown so much
Yeah.
more. Um, and it wasn't fun. And I was so glad they got rid of that. And then they bring this thing, and it's like there were on the beta, I was playing a bear tank, and there was times when I used incap roar to interrupt these things, and then I saw the mob casting something and was like, I don't have my kick and I don't have incap. Fuck. And that's
Yeah.
not fun.
Well, the other interaction that I found very annoying on beta is Hunter's got this brand new shiny trap. You throw it on the ground, and if a mob walks over it, it knocks them up. It knocks everyone around them up. And guess what? Doesn't work on these orbs.
Well, they're
So,
floating, so they can't trigger a
so
trap. They don't have feet.
it's so annoying that hunters get this like AoE CC, and then it's like, ah, well, yeah, no. Have fun, go get a monk, whatever. Yeah, I don't know, and, like, coming off of, Dragonflight, I think this is, like, just even worse, right? So, like, Dragonflight, for those who aren't aware of, like, currently how things are in Dragonflight, Vengeance Demon Hunter is by far the go-to tank, and it's because they just have like, they can keep an entire pack CC locked by themselves for, like, 30 plus seconds with no other external help. And it's all AoE. You have silence, you have fear, chains, like so many things. And they made one step in the right direction by getting rid of this like double sigil stuff for Demon Hunter. So they're removing some of their CC. I think that's good because that means then they can remove some of the things that require CC. But then we're adding back in a need for mass AoE CC again. And so like you're going to be building your group comps around needing AoE CC, and like it's kind of already done at higher ends. I mean AoE stops are really good.
Yeah,
Um
yeah,
but like they're going to be getting worse too because casts are being made to potentially recast after they get stopped if they don't get kicked. So I don't know. It seems like we're kind of conflicting right now, and I feel like we need to have a real discussion about like what is expected of you in a dungeon. Because if it's expected of you to deal with 15 things in just one pack, not even pulling multiple packs together, just one pack,
yeah,
then we need to not have other affixes that are going to require you to use the tools you're going to use in that pack
yeah,
because it's required if you just pull one. Like
yeah.
I could see the argument if you're pulling 3 packs together and then you're having to use everything and then you get the affix on top of it. But like we're talking about just one trash pull. Like,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is like you kind of take a step back and be like, what is the big problem in the Mythic Plus system right now? And like, and I want to be clear here. I think these affixes are a step in the wonderful direction. Like this is a
oh yeah,
positive
agreed.
change. I
100%.
do think it's very fun when you successfully CC all these stupid Razageth orbs. The feeling of having 20% extra
It's
haste.
like all
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah, yeah, it is fun. It is a fun it is immediately noticeable. You feel it, you enjoy it. It's great. I love it. But yeah, I do worry how this interacts with what I think is one of the big problems with Mythic Plus is their kind of insistence on these every mob has to have something like like the idea that we can have just mobs that just like they're just going to swing at the tank and that's all they're going to do, like that is the exception, not the rule anymore.
Yeah.
And at what point does it get ridiculous, especially, especially this is essentially a quote unquote low key affix, right? Because
Yeah.
anyone pushing
Is
at the
it a
high
2?
end, yeah, is just not going to deal with this ever. And so anyone pushing the most coordinated groups that could handle this affix the easiest will just not have to deal with it all. The least coordinated groups that will
Oh,
struggle with this affix the most are going to be the only ones that are dealing with it.
yeah.
Um, and I guess I don't know. I guess the question is, and I think we only did like twos and threes. We weren't really pushing the key number up really high.
Right.
But the question, when you start to get around 8 or 9, like fucking up this affix, like how detrimental is that to you in the key? Like it,
I mean, shit, in the 2s, it was killing us.
fair, yes. But
Like,
like if you like get like a +9 or +10 boss that gets hasted by 20%, is your tank just dead? Like I don't know. I haven't experienced that yet. But so I mean it is interesting to like gauge like what is the consequence of the affix versus the benefit of doing it right. That is a fun gameplay thing. And by the way, I just like I am not like anti affixes. I do think they serve a point. I do think there is a reason to include things that change periodically to make the system fresh, and the idea of like having this week be slightly different from next week and looking forward to a different week. I think the idea of a push week kind of sucks because
yeah.
it requires you to be a person who can just play a lot whenever you want to and not when it works for your schedule. Um, because we've had push weeks with our team in the past that was like, oh, this is the best week of the season, and I am going to be gone all weekend.
Yeah.
And
2 of us are out.
yeah, and so, oh, that sucks. That sucks. Season over. Not really season over, but
Wait 2 months, then
yeah.
you can do it again.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I think having like their reversal on the whole kiss curse thing, I think is good to see. Having things that make you feel stronger and more powerful are fun. That the system should be fun. The point of playing this game is it's fun. It should be challenging. Challenge is fun as well. But yeah, this one I don't know about. Well, we'll see. I really am interested to see what like the general community consensus on these things are once they go live.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, we haven't really talked about the, like, quote, unquote, "raging" one yet,
Yeah,
but we didn't really test with it, but I can't imagine that is any real more impactful than the other affix. I think that this one with the orbs is way more, like, out of line,
yeah,
so I'm interested to see what the other affixes that they kinda come up with are.
yeah.
Um,
I am too. I
yeah,
think I think the raging one, like again, the thing that's fun about kiss curse is when the kiss part is immediately noticeable and you can feel it. And you're right, we didn't get to test the other one. I wish we had. Um, I don't feel like 20% increased damage is going to like feel different for you. I mean, you'll like look over at details and see, oh, I'm doing more damage to the and this mob is dying faster. But
yeah,
like haste, like the reason why everyone loves bloodlust and PI is because haste is like the thing that you notice and feel the most in this game. How
yeah,
often you can press buttons, how long, like that is the one thing, and that's why they keep returning to buffing haste, because buffing haste is fun. It's a fun thing to do. It's noticeable. So yeah, just doing 20% flat more damage, like that's good. I'm glad there's a kiss effect on it. But it's just not going to be as fun. And I would
yeah,
like them to take a look at the bonus effect you get and be like, can we make these like impactfully fun? Like maybe you can run faster, like that, like movement speed, like getting able to run around faster is fun. That is
mhm.
noticeable and fun. Maybe you get like double jumps, although that all the demon hunters will be like, man, I already have that. Eh." Um, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a game designer, but
Yeah.
I just think like just hey, you do more damage for 10 seconds, I think is not necessarily the best thing.
Well, we also don't know, because we didn't get to try it, like, that 20% damage increase could just be brutal too.
Yeah.
Like, it could not be worth the kiss part of it,
True.
which if
True.
that's the case, I mean, that's scary. And it's gonna It's also gonna be, like, gameplay impactful in potentially a negative way because people are gonna be holding cooldowns for the last, like, 20-30% of a pack's health rather than popping
No.
them whenever they're up kind of thing.
People wouldn't do that. No,
Well,
never.
you might have to, right? Like, if
Yeah.
it's killing your tank, you might just even have to. I
Do
mean, obviously, people padding are gonna do that, but, like,
do we
you
know if
may
the
just
effect
have
is
to.
soothable?
I don't know. I haven't watched
Yeah, we
any
should have looked
content on
into
it yet.
that. I feel like it would be because if it's in line with like all other berserk effects, like the I'm
Just
thinking of the that Trog in uh Uldaman that
yeah.
that does that, like that's a soothable effect.
Mhm.
So if it's like that, I think it would be. But
Yeah,
like,
if it's a soothable enrage, then yeah, you just gotta bring an evoker.
well,
One of your 5 slots has to be an evoker.
hooray, hooray, yeah. But then it becomes like a math thing. Is like, is it worth soothing? Because like in Uldaman, the tech was literally to let those things go
Off the
off on the
boss.
boss because you could
Yeah.
kill the boss faster and it made the boss easier. So it was worth it. The juice was worth the squeeze in that
Mm.
instance. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to look at the numbers and see. But I mean, like we're still in beta, right? And these things are probably going to change and adjust. So we're not too worried about specific numbers and more just like the overall feel and design philosophy.
Yeah.
And like to me, the overall feel and design philosophy is I'm a little concerned with this specific thing, but good. I'm glad y'all are thinking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going in the right direction.
Hmm.
I don't wanna be too negative about it. It just it feels some of the things that they're doing just feel contradictory. I think that's really what we're trying to get
Hmm.
at here.
What do you think about the +7 affix, the 15 seconds death timer instead of 5 seconds?
So, really, let's think back, right? So you started playing in Shadowlands Season 2. Well, we'll say Shadowlands Season 3 and you, like, actually started
Yeah,
playing.
yeah.
Um, when's the last time you felt like you were constrained by a keys timer?
Um, Shadowland season 3. I mean, I guess there was in Dragonflight season 1 there were some keys that had some pretty rough timers early on, at least. But yeah, that was pretty much it.
So I think that that's what that's really trying to combat. I don't see it necessarily as like a huge negative. I mean it sucks, right? Because like everybody is used to what it is right now where you can go in on I think we had like a 23 one time. We went in, we wiped at a boss at like 10% health. So not only did we have to redo the entire boss, but then we lost, 5 seconds for every death. So it's just 25 seconds gone. Have to redo the entire boss, and we still plus two the key. So like, it's just I see why they're doing it. Um, we don't really know what the keys are like currently,
Yeah.
so I don't necessarily know if it's good or bad, if it's solving it in the right way. Uh, and again, like you said, tuning is all going to change. So, like, even if we did know now, it could all change by the time that the War Within releases. So, I think as of right now, I'm not too worried about it. It sucks, but it's supposed to, right? So,
I think fundamentally the question here is at what key level should a wipe become a thing that kills the key, right? Like there are key levels in which a wipe is recoverable and you will still have enough time to finish the key on time, and then there are obviously key levels in which if you wipe you're high enough level that should just be game over. And
yeah,
the question is at what point is that? And that's like I think the thing that they're going to have to be it's going to be tricky to balance with this is because this is a +7, right? So if you're doing your weekly vault keys, which I believe like was data mined as like the max vault is a +9 now, which is a pretty big change from the way it is in Dragonflight, which is a
yeah.
+8, I think.
Yeah, it's 8. Rewards go up to 10,
Yeah.
but 8 is what you need for the highest, upgrade
Oh yeah, no,
track.
I was thinking the wrong thing. The thing that was data mined is that you don't start getting aspect crests in keys until +9 instead of +6, which is a
Yeah,
pretty huge change. I haven't seen
that's a huge change.
actual development conversation about that yet, so it could just be something that they like threw a number in the system and to test something and they haven't finalized that and that's why they haven't said anything about it yet. That would be a pretty significant change, and that means suddenly to get aspect crest you're suddenly running all your keys must have at least has have 15 seconds off the timer for death. And that's
Yeah.
like, is that going to be fair? Is that going to make hitting that timer significantly harder? I don't know.
Well,
That's the thing I'd be worried about, is like, obviously people that run in like 12s or higher, if they wipe on a boss, it's probably game over, whether the death timer's 5 seconds or 15 seconds.
yeah,
And
I
it
mean,
should
it's
be.
brutal for wipes now though, right?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
just in general, I mean, you're losing minutes.
Yeah, that's it's
Uh,
a wipe is a minute, right?
yeah,
Wait. Let's do
it's a
math.
little over a
It's
minute.
yeah, no, it's 70 it's 72 75 seconds, right? So
Yeah,
a wipe is over a minute lost, not even counting the time it takes to get back. So
yeah,
that's brutal.
yeah.
And and
It's rough.
and I feel
I
like it should be in the upper echelon of keys, right? Like that should be the case. The open question is, should that be the case in a 7?
Well, it's definitely going to make the case of, you join a pug key and they have their 40 item level undergeared friend in the key a lot more of a immediate leave situation,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because like they're just not going to be able to survive. They don't
Mhm.
have the health and they don't. So yeah, I mean, every time they die, minus 15 seconds. And, if for whatever reason their friend has a B-res and we're sending B-reses on them now, it's like
Mhm.
we're potentially talking like 30 seconds every boss fight we're just losing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. That's when they go and make timer changes to keys and it's like 2 minutes at the absolute maximum the majority of the time in either way, subtracting or adding it. I mean, you could easily rack up 2 minutes in deaths if you're
Yeah.
taking somebody who's undergeared. So
And after our experience in season 3 really pushing our keys up higher than I had ever done before, I would much rather be in a situation where the timer is the enemy than we have to kill this boss that's going to one shot us. Like that is, I
yeah,
think, one of the big problems with Mythic Plus right now,
th-
is that when the timer is no longer an issue, it basically becomes, can you clear the boss or not?
yeah. You get to the point where you're having to have like mythic fight levels of focus, but rather than for 8 minutes at the longest, or let's just be generous and say 11 minutes for insane bosses.
Yeah,
Now we're
that's
talking having to have that sort of focus for 30 plus minutes, and it's like that's taxing,
yeah.
you know?
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that there becomes a point where some people love that. That's what they strive for in keys, but that's very annoying to me.
yeah,
Like not being able to mess up one thing, you mess up one thing and the entire key's over. Yeah, that's not
yeah.
my cup of tea.
Yeah, that's kind of why just don't think I'm ever going to be a title gamer. Like, I think we were like right on that echelon when our group fell apart last season, where we were just like just about to push into that area of keys, like I think 27s, 28s, where it's
Yeah.
like that's the point where, yeah, it's like it's over if you make any small minor mistake. And
Mhm.
yeah, I understand completely that's fun for some people, that's not fun for me. And I'm not saying they should change the system because that's not fun for me, but I think the boss one shot mechanics was a thing at much lower keys than that. And
Oh
like
yeah.
the whether you can pump out enough healing or enough damage to even survive the bosses, let alone like the timer. Who cares about the timer? We need to kill this boss. We need to kill this ad before the person dies, like that stupid fucking tree boss.
That brings back one of the things that you said earlier too. Like um if if we're going in and we absolutely 100% must kill this thing, so we don't know, right, until you fail, that
Yeah,
like this is gonna be something that you have to either sort cooldowns for every time it comes out, 100% make sure it gets kicked every time, you can't skip one and then kick it again. Like
yeah,
you don't know that stuff until you fail it. It just brings back into what you were saying earlier, where like for a group like us where we have a set amount of time that we can play, learning those and like having to spend 3 to 4 keys just to figure out a boss fight and then go do a homework key because we're taking the time to learn it is rough.
yeah,
And like the argument can be made like we can sit in a key that's been depleted and try and learn it or whatever. But at the end of the day, uh, that's, if you're struggling on the first boss and then the second boss is going to be the same thing, now we're talking about potential two keys that you're wasting.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. That kind of sucks. I will say I just don't see them, and I could be wrong about this. I don't see them ever taking away the way depletes work in this game. I don't
Yeah.
see them changing the way like key rerolls work and that kind of thing. Because and the reason is because for the vast majority of people that engage with the system, that is not a problem for them. Like I said,
Yeah.
if you're pugging, which the vast majority of the people that play in the system are maybe not pugging solo, but like two, three people getting together, getting into keys, like that doesn't matter. It's like it's not a problem. And so like I don't think like I think if you would ask them, do you think key depletion is a problem? And they would say, oh, we don't see it as a problem.
I do think that since they're already doing this kind of like dichotomy thing with splitting it into two, we could talk about like, what happens when you get to plus 12? Like maybe your key stops depleting at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be nice for push groups. That
Yeah.
would go in and let you learn.
Yeah, I agree because the reason keys deplete and the reason the key you get is randomized is because they are trying to propagate the system with as many different types and levels of keys as possible, right?
Mhm.
Like they want a person to log into the game and search for a 5 and there to be a 5. And if keys don't deplete, over the course of the season, everyone's going to eventually get higher and higher slowly, and those lower
Yep.
keys are just going to stop existing. That's why it's in there. And so, yeah, I just don't see that going away. But you're absolutely right. Once we get to this, we've now kind of drawn this line in the system that says anything at 12 or higher plays under a completely separate rule base essentially now because we have removed an affix and also just artificially made the key 20% harder that
Yeah.
scales. Now we could say suddenly, okay, well, that's not a problem anymore. Like, is it a problem in this system that I could log on a Wednesday night and there's no 12s? Because the majority of the community has moved on to a 13 or a 14. That I mean, that's still technically a problem, but that's much less of a problem than it is for the people engaging in the system between a 2 and a 10, which is what the
Yeah.
majority of people are doing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting any additional rewards at a 12, right? Like
Right.
you're doing it for fun at that point.
Yeah.
The problem is if you're coming into a season late, people have moved on from a 12 and now you're not getting taken because you haven't done anything around that level.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely still problems with it for sure.
um but kind of wanting to move on, I think we've talked about a lot of these topics. So, the next thing I want to ask you about, uh we have talked about this until are blue in the face, and I don't understand why at all things are like the way that they are right now. But you get to a point in Mythic Plus that you don't really get to in raid. So in raiding, right, you go through, you do the raid in normal, you get gear, all of that stuff. You go into heroic, you get better gear, and then at the end of heroic, um, you know, most of the time, you get a mount, right? You kill the boss, you get a mount, you get an achievement. Awesome, fun stuff. And then you go into Mythic and you're getting better gear. And at the end of it, you get a mount. You get something fun. Uh with Mythic Plus, it's like you go up to fives now, which you start at two. So you're really only talking like 3 key levels. And once you do all fives, you get a mount. Awesome. And then you go up and you are pushing to, let's just say 9. So 9 is what you're going to get your max reward from, or we'll even be generous and say 10. So now you're getting your max gear at 10, and you're also getting portals at 10, so teleports to the dungeon. And then there's just this wide open void between that and 0.1% for a title. Now, there's an argument to be made. There's a title in the middle there for Keystone Hero, but that's probably somewhere around the 10 range as well. So I'm just going to loop it in with that. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. The reward structure for Mythic Plus seems really weird. Um, and maybe that's intended, but I don't know.
I do think it's a really interesting choice that they have. I mean, I agree that the gear reward should cap off, and I think a 10, let's say, being the place where the gear drops off feels fair to me. I do agree, and I think this is actually one of the biggest problems in Mythic Plus right now, is that it doesn't make sense to me that they are not incentivizing people to go deeper into the system at all, at all. Like like we saw what happened with Plunderstorm. That you put a fucking mount on renowned level 30, and people who hate the game mode will
Get
grind
a
it for days just to get a mount. And it's like, for the health of the game, if you want people to engage in these systems, and like, in my opinion, as a developer of a game, not just from a business standpoint but from just a creative standpoint, you want people to constantly be pushing themselves into doing harder and harder content. Like, you want to incentivize a person saying, hey, last season I only did normal mode raid and I only got up to a 5 in keys. And I really want to step into heroic a little bit, try heroic raids, and I really want to push my key level higher.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, you would want that continuously. And obviously there's a limited number of rewards you can have at some point. Yes. And I'm completely fine for the top echelon reward being something that by design only a very, very small percentage of people can get. Totally
Yeah.
fine with that. But yeah, it just seems so obvious that they just need to pepper the system with some incentive to push beyond 1,500, 2,000.
Well, the other thing is the 1,500 reward, the all fives, it's the same mount. The entire expansion.
Yeah,
It's just a recolor.
it's the least attractive reward of all time. It's
And it wasn't even a fucking flying mount this time.
yeah.
So
How nobody thought about that, like, during development,
Ah,
but
hey,
like,
new dragon riding system, guys. Have fun with your ground mount.
yeah. This is why it just, sometimes it feels like Mythic Plus is simultaneously the most participated in form of gameplay in this game, and also the most ignored. That just nobody in the course of development thought, "Hey, we should have a dragon riding mount be a reward for Mythic Plus." It just, yeah,
Yeah.
it boggles my mind.
It
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem. I think this is a problem. Like, as someone who has every season this expansion pushed above 3,000, like, and just done it just because I wanted to, like, how many more people would have joined me on that push if there was something related to it? And like, at
yeah.
2,500 we get like the mythic level tier effects
Yeah.
on, which is
Transmog.
just like the shoulders are like a little fiery. Ooh, yay, thank you. Um, that's not even a reward. And I'm gonna bold statement here. Teleports to dungeons are not a reward. Like, that's
Not
not a,
anymore
no,
with the portal room stuff that they're doing.
no, no. A nice, cool little convenient thing, especially when the dungeon is incredibly far away. But that's not an
Bracken hard.
incentive to push, um,
Yeah.
really. So yeah, I mean, I think so, and I know, like, people are so afraid of, like, the Mythic Raiders are so afraid of and angry about Mythic Plus being able to get almost equivalent gear, not quite equivalent gear, but almost equivalent gear. So don't make it gear. Make it cosmetics, make it mounts, make it the things that people love to collect. Make it the cool things. Like, try to bring back some of that old school stuff where you see a person with this transmog, you know, that's a 300 or 3,000 IO gamer right there. I can see, I don't have to have an add-on that hovers over his name to see what his score is. I can see it visually with that mount he's equipped, or that transmog he's wearing. Like,
Yeah.
that just seems so obvious to me.
Yeah. I definitely feel like that the reward structure needs to be fixed. I don't really know the solution for it. I mean, at the end of the day, it takes development time. I mean, if it's additional titles or stuff like that, it's probably not too super in depth. But I mean, if we're talking like mounts or gear or stuff like that, it's gonna take time. So maybe that's why they're not doing it. And honestly, it probably is why they're not doing it. It just I wish that we would spend some time on it. But also at the other point of it, I understand that the majority of people playing the game aren't getting to this point.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, is it because the majority of the people playing the game realize that they're not going to get anything from doing that?
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
So, like, yeah,
yes, I think so. I think so. They have not been incentivized to push. Yeah, and I mean, your point to development work makes sense. Obviously, there's only so many hours in the day, and when you look at things like mythic only mounts, like if you look at the fire owl mount you get from Mythic Fire Act, that- that's just that's just what the boss does. They just took the art that they did for the
that's
Tindril
fair.
boss, and they just said, okay, this is a mount and a shapeshift now. So that's why that, like, they're okay with spending the dev time on transitioning that to a mount because they've already built the model for this other thing and they can just port it over. So yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
start saying things like, okay, now we need to spend dev time to create a completely new mount, and if we want it to be a unique mount, because that would be the point of having a reward, is it's not just a recoloration, it's something unique and different and exciting you want to get. Well, then you're looking at it, and as a developer you say, okay, only 10% of the player base is going to be able to get this thing. It's going to cost X amount of hours, and then you just do simple math and say that's not worth our time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the boring, unexciting, disappointing part of of running a game, but it's true.
Yeah. I also I see why community feedback for things that they're not able to achieve recently has been awful. Which, like, to that I say not everything in the game is made for you.
Yeah.
Not everything in the game is made for me. I can't tell you that I've ever gotten a PvP mount. I've never gotten a mythic mount. So, like, it's just how it is sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
you're not entitled to every reward if you can't do the content.
Sure, sure. And the PvP mount thing is interesting because yeah, like that is almost the exception that makes the rule that we were just talking about there, that like these are unique mounts for PvP.
Hmm.
This is the thing you can't get anywhere else. It's completely unique, and it is a system in which only a very small percentage of people will get that mount ever.
Yeah.
And they're okay with doing that. I think it is like it is almost like a kind of a loss leader thing where you eat the cost of that because PvP is like not dead, but not
Well, it's
not
been ignored for
alive.
so long that
Yeah.
it's probably not in a super healthy state. I
Yeah.
like to think that it is. I mean, there's still PvP content creators and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's going to be the same story if they just ignore, Mythic Plus for so long or Raid for so long.
Yeah.
It's, unfortunately, PvP just got ignored for expansion after expansion after expansion, and people just moved on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I enjoyed PvP when I first played the game, like just in the world PvP, like that was fun when I was a kid and had more patience. Um I just never was like an arena gamer person. Like I think battlegrounds were fun, and I think the game felt like designed around battleground type objective combat PvP, like the
Yeah.
arena 3v3 type stuff. Like it never felt to me that that was like where the game shined. I know it was like the most popular form of PvP for a very long time, but
Hmm.
I just like to me it's like completely impenetrable. Like I would just never do it because I would just
Yeah.
I like there's just no way.
Yeah, yeah, no, I get that. Well, so one final question I want to ask you about affixes, and then we'll kind of jump over to a fun topic that is going to be, I feel like, a lot more uplifting than kind of where we've been at. But so if you had to design the next two affixes, do you have anything that, like, I know you've already said like the kiss part of it would be, moving fast, something impactful to your gameplay.
Hmm.
Um, I guess, would you be looking for them to kind of like recycle affixes that they've used in the past that people have liked, or would you like to see something completely new?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the risk with the gut answer I have is that something completely new because new is fun, but also there's always the risk that new is bad. Um, they were like at the beginning of Dragonflight, they were like, I don't know if we're going to do a seasonal affix. I don't know if we need to do that with these rotating dungeon pools. We don't really need a seasonal. And the community went, no, no, do it. And they went, fine. And they made Thundering. And we were like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be misses, and that's always a risk you deal with. Um, I want to keep seeing new things in the system, and I want them to keep having to like struggle and push and come up with new ideas. So I think I would prefer a system in which they're going to have to come up with new ideas. I will say I really like the idea that the affix are themed.
Yeah,
Whether it's themed around, I mean, it's Zalateth, right? So it seems like it's expansion themed, uh not not tier themed, which is fine.
yeah.
I think that's totally fine. But like that's the fun part of seasonals is it gives the season, outside of just the dungeons, it gives the season as a whole like a kind of specific flavor to it, like, and I like that. So I would
The
want to see them keep doing new things. Yeah, I mean, I really don't like randomly popping up in the middle of combat stuff. Like as a healer on a very intensive tyrannical high key fight, having a thing happen that I am expected to deal with while also dealing with just all the shit of the damage of the fight has never been fun for me. Like it's interesting because when I first joined the game in Shadowlands, especially season 3, like there were some healing intensive fights, but like it was a
it's gotten
really
so much more volatile.
it was a really good time to enter the game as a very rusty healer because there really wasn't that much demand on the healer, just throughput. You could kind of get by, and it became a game of just seeing how much you could get away with doing damage versus healing, and that was fun. And so like
Yeah.
doing affixes like explosive in that season didn't feel as bad because like I had the globals. Everyone wasn't going to die if I spent a few globals moon firing some explosives. And then we moved into Dragonflight with that, and it just stopped being the case. And it just like those affixes got more and more miserable. So yeah, I don't want any more things popping up in the middle of combat
Is
that
your
that I
problem
have to deal with.
is your problem with things just popping up in general, or is it that it's on a random interval? Like if you think of like quaking, there was one timer that would start after quaking happened, and then there were three different times it could go off.
Yeah.
I think that that is infinitely worse because now you're holding something for something that might not happen, but then you have to hold it more for something that again might not happen.
Yeah.
So I think if things are going to pop up or things are going to happen, they need to happen on a set timer, kind of like thundering. was. And I hated thundering, but I
Yeah.
think that's better.
I don't disagree. And Quaking was the worst affix of all time. Rest in peace, you stupid bastard. I hate you. Um, I will say the one thing that is good about random is if something is truly random, then I don't have to think about it until it happens, right? Like
Sure.
cognitive load in Mythic Plus is very, very high. Very high.
Hmm.
And so if I do something on a set timer, then I have all the shit I'm doing, and also I have this timer in the corning that I have to keep an eye on to see when it's which going down. Now that can be planned around and that's fine, but if it's truly random, then I can just take that part of my brain and say, I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't have to worry about it until it actually happens. Um, because like the worst thing in the world was on quaking when you could like see the quaking timer tick down, and you also saw the boss timer tick down. That's going to be a stack mechanic, and you're just like watching these two timers tick down at the same time, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just like fuck, like we're fucked, it's over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think set interval can be good, but I also think like if it's something that is truly random, I guess ultimately like the question is, should it be something that's truly random that you have to react to, or just is going to slightly change how things are happening?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think if it's truly random, it needs to not be to the detriment of like you're gonna die
Yeah.
if it goes off. Like
Yeah.
it can't be afflicted, right? Like
I hated that fucking affix. I hated it so much. And non-healers would be like, "Well, it's easy." It's like, "Fuck you." No, no, it's not.
yeah, yeah. It's easy until you go into like Throne of the Tides. You have to dispel somebody immediately, and
Yeah.
you just use your dispel on unafflicted.
Yeah, I mean, we would go into that boss, and I would basically tell my group is like every dispel cooldown is going on the flame shock. I cannot get afflicted. I just
Yeah,
I can't. One of you are gonna have to do it, or we're fucked.
and then you go into a pug and nobody does it.
Yeah, of course. And
So
then the or
move
the
on.
uh what is the fucking time boss? the swirly time
Oh,
boss and
yeah,
I
time ways?
yeah, thank you. My brain just completely forgets these dungeons the second we walk out of them. Where there's 2 dispels, you have to dispel one immediately and then let the other wear off, and then also afflicted. It's just like I was literally in keys where I had to do both afflicteds and that, and it was the worst feeling in the world. It was
Yep.
just terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
But it's gone.
Well,
It's gone. We never have to see it again. I'm so happy
that's what I
about
was
it.
about to say. At least you don't have to worry about it now.
Yeah.
Um, well, that being said, I guess kind of jumping into some of the War Within stuff, kind of to cover quickly what we've really tested in the War Within and what we're feeling there. So, as it currently stands, I myself have been looking primarily into like survival hunter stuff, really hunter in general, but really focusing on survival and mage. And both of those just look like they're so much fun. The gameplay loops are amazing. The new arcane, I I played around with it. So the last time I played Arcane Mage was season 2 of Shadowlands. And that was like you had Radiant Spark and all of this other stuff. And they've simplified Arcane a lot. But like, in my opinion, not in a bad way. It feels like you are just constantly shitting out stuff. And dude, it feels so good. And on top of that, like going into survival, visually nothing's really changed with survival, but the rotation has like 3 or 4 feedback loops that just keep giving you like resets or like reduced cooldown, or and so like all of that feels good too. So I think that they're really in a good spot when it comes to a lot of the class redesign stuff. Now, again, like I said, blinders on. I played with Boomkin a little bit. Boomkin to me feels more or less the same. I looked at Rhett because I played Rhett for Dragonflight, so I looked into Rhett for the War Within a little bit, and it feels more or less the same. So I do think that there's something to be said there. But we can talk about that in a second. What have you been looking at, Scott?
So I've been tank pilled lately. Basically, I played Cataclysm and decided to play Blood DK because I initially tanked back in Cataclysm. So I'm almost going to be middle aged, and so I'm going through my midlife crisis, and that means just doing the things I did in my 20s over again. So I was like, hey, tanking's fun. I'm going to do this in retail. So on beta, I've just been playing tank. So I've tried out Blood DK. I tried out Bear, and I did a very, very little bit on Brewmaster because Brewmaster is like the tank that I really, really, really want to be my favorite. And it's just not.
Yeah,
I really want it to because it just seems so like I love monks. Like I played a lot of Mistweaver in season 3. I just love like the aesthetic of monk. I think it's really fun and great, and I've always it's always so interesting that it's like the least played class because it's like the one that I've always enjoyed the most. But I've
yeah,
just never really been able to get in a groove with Brewmaster. But Blood DK feels incredible in the War Within. Like I don't know if it's gonna be the meta tank in Mythic Plus, just because of the utility factor and other classes bringing so much more utility. Like that's the thing that DKs have always suffered with in Mythic Plus is that just
well,
don't.
yeah, and the fact that they're just a DK, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
their survivability is their health bar, and at some point you just
yeah.
get one shot.
Some key level, yeah, you're just gonna get one shot. Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah,
but it's very very fun. They did like a complete. Basically, Blizzard's track record through Dragonflight has been when we rework a class, it's gonna
play it.
own.
Yeah,
It's gonna own. And then of course they like walk back the rework, and that's how we get Holy Paladin in its current state, which is the saddest thing in the world
so sad.
because I played Holy Paladin in season 2 and it was awesome. It wasn't just awesome because it was overpowered. Obviously, yes, it was extremely overpowered when it first came out, but it was awesome because you just felt like you had a button for everything. And then they just slowly nerfed those buttons over time to where not only were they no longer overpowered, but they felt weak and useless, and it just stopped being fun to play. It's poor
Yeah,
Holy Paladin. I think they're going to be actually okay. I've seen some stuff about them in the latest iteration that makes them look good. But anyway, Blood DK is awesome. They've put a AOE grip in. They've made it so grips silence the enemy too. they brought Bone Storm back and made it actually usable. It's just like really really fun, and it feels like it. I will say Blood DK feels like there's a lot of buttons to press. It feels like with Brewmaster they cut down on the number of buttons you have for sure. And then Bear, of course, is Bear. There's like 3 buttons. Um,
Mhm.
but man, Blood DK feels like there's a lot of like I needed a lot of hotkeys to be hitting every single button, and they're all like satisfying buttons to press, which is good. But man, yeah, the other tank I was playing a lot of was Bear. I like it a lot. I really want like the moon bear loon tree to be awesome because it just feels like just like aesthetically a really fun thing.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel that good to me. And I don't know if it was my build. It was possibly my build. But it just felt like it felt lacking. It felt a little bit lacking. Um, but Bear is just always fun to me. So um, the Druid of the Claw version of Bear, I haven't like had the guts to do the cat weaving in the middle of tanking part of it yet. Like it's kind of designed around being able to do that, and that just seems terrifying to me. But I think it's fun. I think it's a good shape right now. Those are the only ones I've
So,
played.
um, I guess, generally, what are your what are your feelings on hero talents? Because when I think of hero talents and when they announced them, right? The first one that they announced and was like in their reveals, like the mountain thing, you're gonna have all of this electricity and thunderclaps and just everything's gonna be electrically related and you look so cool. And then you have hero talents like all of Hunter's. All of Hunter's hero talents, like visually, do nothing. There's the Sentinel one that summons a bird, but nobody else gets to see it. Only you get to see it. So yeah, I don't know. I like the ones that visually change things. You know, that's why Mage is so cool. Like Frostfire, your main ability gets turned into Frostfire Bolt. So now anybody who can see you casting Frostfire Bolt knows you're playing Frostfire Mage. The Orb one, I can't think of what it's called. Anyways, there's Sun Fury and Spellslinger. And I haven't done too much with Sun Fury yet. But I know Spellslinger, like I said, for Frost and Arcane, like you get these little splinters over your head. And for Frost, they're just like mini icicles. Um, but it's causing you to just launch out a ton of shit. Like for Arcane, this entire hero talent, like you have additional shit over your head that's getting launched at the boss. You're pressing buttons, which is causing arcane orbs to get launched. Like, there's just so much shit going on, and it looks so cool. And really, I think that that's where the hero talents that feel good are the ones that look good currently. Um, I don't know if you feel the same way or not, but that's kind of where I've been leaning towards.
Yeah, yeah. Here's my thought on hero talents. A developer came up with this idea, and when he came up with the idea he had like 3 examples of this cool idea, and I think Mountain Thane was one of them. I think Frostfire Mage was another one, and maybe like the Void Weaver Priest was another one. This is pure supposition. I don't know. And they fell in love with this idea because it's such a fun idea. I really think it is a fun idea. And then they had to sit down and make like 40 of these.
Yeah.
And they quickly realized, "Oh no. Um do you have an idea for this one? No?
More
Okay."
damage.
um
More
a-
defensive.
and that's what it feels like. It feels like there are ones that just have this clear design philosophy and this clear visual part that just feel like this is the concept of a hero talent and a hero class cooking on a great level. And then there's some that are like, I don't know, man, what about trees?
Yeah, yeah. That's what every balanced druid wants to do, press trees more.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it should be their philosophy that you should be able to tell what hero talent a person is taking by just looking at them while they're fighting. I
Yeah.
completely agree. Every single one of these should be like that. If I am the Moon Bear, you should be able to tell. Like one of Moon Bear's talents turns Thrash into arcane damage. Why does that not change the effect of Thrash to look arcane? It just
Yeah.
should do that. It just should do that. Why doesn't it do that? And I think that's true across the board. Frankly, one of the other reasons I'm trying tanks out this season is because the Resto Druid hero talents are so boring. And I'm not saying they're bad. They're not bad. Like one of them buffs your trees, your Guardians of the Grove, whatever, and the other buffs your bleeds and hots. It's the one that's shared with Feral, and like that seems like really cool for Mythic Plus because it's going to simultaneously make my hots tick for more, add additional hots, but also it's going to make cat weaving super more effective. And I'm like, that's awesome
Hmm.
conceptually, but gameplay wise, visually, which is in my opinion even more important than gameplay in this particular thing, no one's gonna be able to know except if they see me change into cat form. They'll be, oh, he's probably that one. But it should, it's like, yes, like if we're calling these hero trees, it should be heroic. It should be awesome. Like the I don't even know what the warrior one that makes the warrior bigger does, but I sure know what's really cool that the warriors are just gonna be like 20% bigger. That's awesome. That's awesome. And like
Yeah.
I just really feel like, and I hope that, we're running out of time here, but I hope that they are like hard at work thinking for going down the list on every single one of these things. It's like, how can we make this visually impactful, for the player and for the players around them, because you want to feel heroic, you want to feel that way, and it's just not the case for some of these. Like the Druids of the Grove, my trees as a resto druid look like anyone's trees, like any druid's healing trees. They look exactly the same. There's nothing different there. And the only real benefit I get from this hero tree is when my trees are out, I do more healing, which cool. I like doing more healing, but
Hmm.
that, like, make them like badass trees. I don't know, like just make them like look like
One
cool
giant
trees.
tree.
Yeah, make them look like the fucking ancients, not just like little grove guardians, but they're like the fucking ancients of wisdom walking. That might be a little much, but it's just something. Just do something.
So, apart from the visuals of it, I want to get your thoughts on this. So, a lot of the DPS trees for hero talents just give you passive things that happen when you do your rotation correctly. The exception to that is Frostfire Mage, but that's not really an exception because all it does is replaces your primary spell with Frostfire Bolt.
Hmm.
So it replaces Frostbolt with Frostfire Bolt or Fireball with Frostfire Bolt. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's good? I personally I feel like that's good. It allows them to not really change a whole lot of gameplay based off of this thing that may or may not be a borrowed power, and really leave the gameplay changes to the actual talent trees. But I was talking with somebody else that you and I know the other day, and they said it's kind of lame that everything is just passive. Like it doesn't really change how you're doing much of anything, really.
Yeah, I think it depends, and I think the problem they're actually running into is they're not being consistent with it. That there are
Hmm.
some classes, some hero talents that are active and change up your gameplay rotation a little bit. There's some that change it up a lot, and there's some, as you said, that are completely active, passive, and do nothing. And the only way this works in my mind is if you have a choice between one active and one passive. Like almost like that. That is kind of the way I feel about the two bear hero talent trees, is that the moon bear one is almost entirely passive. You have to use another ability, another talent that you wouldn't take unless you were doing that tree. So that's a little bit different gameplay, but it's pretty much just like your moonfire is doing more damage. Hooray.
Hmm.
um Whereas the druid of the claw one, it's changing, like your auto attacks will trigger maul to do something different, so it's not entirely, it's a little bit more complicated. And I
Yeah.
like giving players that choice between one that's more passive and one that's not. I do think it's smart because you don't want to get things overly complicated. And I think like the reason why both the druid ones are or the resto druid ones are completely passive is because resto druid's already pretty complicated. Like the amount of work you have to do to ramp up for big healing in a raid there's a lot to do and there's a lot of buttons to press in a very specific order and at a specific time. And like adding other stuff to that is like, oh, this is probably approaches too much. So
Yeah.
I think it's healthy to look at this stuff as things that will enhance what you're already doing or maybe bring new flavor to what you're already doing. But that gets back to my previous complaint, which is, well, if that's the case, then it needs to be visually distinctive. Like
Hmm.
if it's going to be 100% passive, it has to look different.
Yeah.
If it's not going to be 100% passive, if it's going to be active, then there's less impetus on it looking distinct because you're going to be feeling different because you'll be doing different things. So yeah, that's I think the struggle with it. And I believe that they've said that this is supposed to be an evergreen system. They are not putting systems into the game anymore that will not be carried forward
Sure.
into the next expansion. I don't know how that's going to work.
You're just gonna have a middle tree in your talent tree eventually,
Yeah, like
like
I
a
just
full on middle tree.
it's just like, yeah, like are they, because I do think it's smart that they're not giving any more talents in the main tree because that becomes impossible to balance, right? Like
Hmm.
the way the Dragonflight talent trees work right now is that you have to end up making choices about your capstones. Well, for most classes it works this way, and if you just got more talent points, that would just the whole system would break down. So this
Yeah.
does feel like a very logical uh carry forward of that, is we can't give people 5 new points. We don't want to just add more on the bottom of the trees. It's going to look ridiculous. So let's just make a new tree and we'll do it that way. And you'll be able to get all the points in there, but we'll put choice nodes in there and that's how you can kind of customize it. And the fact that you can switch between two, like that's a smart logical evolution of this whole thing. And then it's like, okay, but how do you evolve it from there? Like in the next expansion in Midnight, like w- anything, is it going to be, I don't know, well, I'll leave that up to them, but
Yeah.
I think it's a cool idea, and we'll see how it works. I think it's interesting if you look at like the tier sets in the first season. It's very clear that they are making the tier sets in a way that they are equally effective for both hero trees, because they really don't want to force you in the first season when you have these two new things. They don't want to force you into one or the other. I would
Right.
expect that to change as the expansion goes on. I would think probably by the third raid, we're probably going to see a tier that just says you should play as a moon bear. Like you should do this.
Yeah, yeah, they're gonna get more powerful. I
Yeah.
I don't know. We're like you said, we're running out of time at this point. Like the it's gonna end up being like something like they did during Dragonflight, where Covenant abilities carried over, and you're a monk putting blue shit on the ground, but all the other monk stuff is this light green color, and not until close to the end of the expansion are we gonna actually change it to be this light
But
green
thank
color.
God they
So
did that. And they also got
yeah.
rid of Bone Dust Brew in The War Within, which makes me so happy because that was the one monk thing where I'm like, it doesn't make sense. I'm a monk. Why do I have a brew of bone dust? Stop it.
So that is yeah, I think we're running out of time for them to actually do it in time for release. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe eventually they'll do some changes like that, and hopefully we'll visually be able to see things
I think it's a really
change.
cool idea. I think having another layer of customization is fun. Like getting to kind of, I think it's always fun when you get to walk into like a key or a boss fight and be like, okay, which talents are better for this? And now you also have, oh, maybe this hero tree is better for this dungeon versus that
Yeah.
dungeon. It allows you to switch things up. It allows your gameplay to be a little bit more dynamic. I like that kind of stuff. So it's a good idea. We'll see how it works in implementation. I think it's going to be tricky. I think it's complicating things once again. You know, we already have how many fucking specs are in this game, and now we're going to have all these specs, but also hero talents that have
Times
to,
two.
yeah. And it's tough because they they have to design them in a way that they work for two classes, because that's the thing that the way they design them. The idea here was that um
You're bridging the gap of
yeah,
some
yeah.
sort.
And so that's like in some ways that makes sense and is easy. Like I think Frostfire Mage is the perfect one. It's like, well, how do we make a hero talent that works for both frost and fire? Hey, solved. And then you have ones like Resto and Feral, and you're like, wait. what we do here.
Yeah.
I think the solution they came up with there, even if it is boring, makes sense. But you can see in kind of some of these when you have like when you have these classes that have tank, healer, and DPS all in one, and the struggle at finding an idea and a concept that is equally effective for a tank and a healer, or equally effective for a DPS and a tank, and they've they like to challenge themselves for sure, because this is another added layer. Like the Final Fantasy expansion just came out this week, and so I've been playing that game a little bit, and it's just like it's just remembering like how night and day these systems in these games are, with like that is there's just you just have your abilities, and you can't there's no build. Like the most control over your character you have in that game is some secondary stats, and that's about it. And it's like this game is like there's an literally infinity number of builds you could possibly have, and you have to find a way to balance all these against each other and against other classes. And now you've added these hero talents to the thing, which also have
And
choice nodes. So
trinkets and weapons.
oh my
Yeah.
god, yeah, yeah. They really don't make it easy on themselves for sure.
Yeah, no. So, I did have one final thing I wanted to talk about, and that's because we'd be a little bit remiss to not talk about something that came in the most recent update from Blizzard. So, shamans finally got their rework, and I don't know much about shaman. I'm not going to act like I do, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But the one main thing that I do want to talk about is we are now going to be living in a world where there is one class that doesn't have a raid buff,
Hmm.
and that's DK. Now, DK has grip. DK is still super useful. They have B-res, stuff like that. There's a reason that they'll be brought to raid, but they are the only class that doesn't have a raid buff. I guess I'm being a little bit generous because Warlock is like Healthstone, but like, let's be real. You're probably not doing Mythic Prog without a Healthstone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where you either have to have a raid buff, or you have to bring just an incredibly rich amount of utility that you're mandatory, and that's Warlock. Like Hellstone, Portal, whatever. Like you have to have a
yeah,
Warlock. You just have
Gate,
to.
Soulstone,
Yeah.
Hellstone.
And that's I think DK is in that world too, where grip is just so often so useful that like they'll probably always need at least one in a raid. I think overall, the thing about this is that it's a double down on the design philosophy that they introduced in Dragonflight, which is just essentially this game's impossible to balance. Which we just talked about why that is, but this game's impossible to balance. There's no way we can get true unified balance amongst all these classes and specs. So the only way we can ensure that classes are represented in raids is we give them a buff that nobody else can give them, and that's our design philosophy. And I think genuinely that is just what it is now. Is that they're like, we cannot balance this game enough that these players are not going to stack broken classes. So every class is going to have something they specifically bring to raid, and then we will ensure at least every class is representative in a raid at the top end. And that's where we're at now, right? Like I think Max updated his like raid roster list based on this news, and there are 15 spots taken up now.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think of it this way. Like, are we really solving the class stacking issue, or are we just making it to where they're stacking less? Like, congratulations, now you have to have one of every single class in your raid,
Yeah.
but the open spots are still just gonna be the best class.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just gonna happen that way. Like the best class for the boss, I should say. It isn't.
Yeah, and we're also in this really interesting world where, because specs, like classes exist in this game, yes, but like specs are often so different from each other, even within the same role. I'm not even talking about like tank versus healer. Like the three mage specs play so differently from each other that
Mhm.
telling a person like, okay, we need you because you're a mage, but fire's better than frost. Sorry, you have to play fire. It's like, well, I don't know how to play that one. I don't know how to play this one. Like, it's look, this is a solution, right? This is a solution to the problem they saw, in that there's no way we can keep these things balanced, but it is not a complete solution for sure, because
Yeah, I really think the thing that's sad to me is this is more so pushing the you're bringing the class, not the player mentality.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily like the mentality. I tend to like to bring people that I enjoy are, decent if we're doing higher level content and stuff like that. So I don't love the fact that you're forced into having every single class in your raid,
Yeah.
but I do also get it. Like you don't want something to be exponentially underrepresented. And Mythic Plus causes this to be even more so the case because you only have 5 slots, so there's really only 5 classes that people are playing,
That
when you look at the high end, so
that is, I agree, the side effect from this philosophy is now you have severely fucked with Mythic Plus comps to the point
Mhm,
where every 5 man is going to need a druid for as long as that 3% versatility buff exists. If you're doing a high key, you need a druid. Now,
mhm.
it doesn't matter. Like, it can be a tank, it can be a DPS, or it can be a healer, but you need a druid. And so that's boom, one spot gone, druid covered. Now you need 4 spots left. You need a lust, right? You need a battle res. Well, druid can cover that, but like it absolutely gets to the point where and I don't know how powerful the shaman one's gonna be. Like I think it's like 2% mastery, but also has wind fury on it at the same time,
Yeah.
right? Like that could end up being like super powerful, and it's like boom, we need that. And then yeah, like in a 20-man raid, getting one of each class is not that big of a deal because yeah, you cover all the classes and then you have some spots left over. Great. In a 5 man, it's impossible. It's impossible. And it's like it's such a pain in the butt when you are like we've experienced this, or we had a 4 stack of people. We had you and me and a couple of our friends are on, and we're trying to get a fifth, but we can't just get a fifth. We have to get a fifth that fits in with our buff uh, combination to give us.
Typically, it's a lot is
Yeah,
what we're
it is
missing.
typically a lust and based on what we play, and I don't like that. I don't like it. I understand why they're doing it. I do. I don't think it's a valid solution to the problem. And it is unfun to be thinking about how you and I are in this next tier going to be trying to get 20 people to do Mythic. And not only do we now have to find 20 people, but we have to find 20 people willing to play 15 very specific classes and
That we
plus
like.
more.
Yeah.
And that's tough. And there's people out there saying, "Oh, you don't need those specific classes. There's nothing saying you need those in your group." It's like, well, yes and no. If you're going to be running Mythic, if you're going to be maybe not like world first bleeding edge, but still doing the hardest content when it's current, you want to give yourself every possible advantage you have. And
Yeah.
just walking into the raid and saying, oh, sorry, we couldn't find anyone that plays shaman, so we just don't have 2% mastery and wind fury for the entire raid. Like, that's not practical. Like, you're just not going to want to do that. And
The
I don't know,
one
man.
positive I will say to all of this is, with this shaman buff also bringing Wind Fury, it puts us in this situation to where we have for 5-man content specific classes that work well together. And I think that that's kind of cool. You get this synergy of
Yeah.
like, okay, we're running a wizard comp. We need a DK, we need a mage. Um, that those are like, or not DK, we need a demon hunter and a mage. And that's like required because that's buffing all of our magic damage.
Yeah.
Um, and so for shaman, it's like, okay, so now maybe we're running a full melee comp. We want a shaman, we want a warrior. Um, I think that's cool, but at the end of the day, if shaman ends up having to be your healer and they're the worst healer, but melee comps are the way to go, you're having to sacrifice something. You're either not going a melee comp or you're not bringing a shaman to buff the melee. So
Yeah.
it's just a rough spot to be in. And like I said, I think it's cool. I think it's going to cause some interesting group compositions, but at the end of the day, it's going to be solved to a formula at any point, and it's just going to be play what is the best 5 classes. So Og in the best 4 classes, and
Oh, Og, what have you done? I know we don't want to talk about this today because we've already got a full plate, but I think it's very fascinating that they introduced Og, they introduced this concept of a support buff class, and then in the next expansion, they did nothing with that at all. Like,
Mhm.
either in my mind, you either say this was an experiment, it didn't work, we're gonna take it out, or say this worked, now we need more of them. Um, and they didn't do either of those things, and that is really fascinating to me. Because yeah, like the top end, the world first raiders are gonna run two Ogs in their raid forever, unless it is like substantially changed or nerfed. They're going to do it because they're the people that have the skill and the time and the ability to min max that thing to overperform like fucking crazy. And it's just going to be the way it's going to be forever now. And it's really interesting to me that they just didn't, they kind of just kicked that can down the road a little bit. I don't know what they're going to do with it. Pretty fascinating, but
Yeah,
yeah.
we should definitely do an episode on Og because
Yeah.
as somebody who played it when it first came out, not because it was overpowered, but because it was like super fun to play, and now absolutely detests the spec. I would really like to go into more detail on that.
Yeah, that
So,
sounds fun. That sounds fun.
um, anyways, I think that that is pretty much all we had planned for today. So, um, the main thing that I wanted to call out here is being that this is the first episode. For all of the socials, we have YouTube, an email, we have Twitter, and then we're going to be on a bunch of different podcasting stuff. So,
Mhm.
for YouTube, it's Yelling Into the Void. You can email us at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. And the Twitter is Into the Void Wow. Um, so, Scott and I want to know what's the best affix Mythic Plus has ever had. Uh, so, tell us why. And either email us at, like I said, yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com, over at Twitter, Into the Void Wow, or you can leave comments on our YouTube video.
And if you say
Um,
sanguine, don't.
yeah, just stop watching.
Yeah, we don't want you. We don't want you. Yeah, and if you are not already subscribed to this podcast, which you're at the end of the podcast, why haven't you clicked that button yet? What is wrong with you? We really encourage you to do that. We're new to this, obviously. This is our first episode. We hope you guys like it. We want to hear the feedback. If you liked our perspective on things, if we're different enough from those elitist assholes at the top of the ladder. Just kidding. I love those guys. I watch all that content too. But let us know. Let us know. We're anywhere you can find podcasts: iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Just all the places we're there. Presumably, at the time of this recording, we're not there. But if you're listening to it, I would assume by now we are there, because that's how technology works. But
That
um,
is indeed how technology works, Scott.
thank you, thank
But
you.
also, please consider rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts. Every time that we get a review, rating, any sort of interaction with that, even on YouTube, for example,
Yeah,
it really gives us more exposure, introduces us to more people. Things get suggested to more people, so it allows us to make more of this content. So if
yeah.
you enjoy what we're doing here, please leave those comments. All right. Well, I think we're good to go. So thanks, everybody. And until next time, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.